December 1983 and June 1985, Leonard Lake and Charles Ng kidnapped over 20 women.
You have to prepare yourself, because there's no way the government is taking care of you.
That's true.
That's why we live off the grid.
What are you gonna do, kill us?
Well, that's sort of up to you, Brenda.
It's okay, Leonard. No one live here for miles.
My baby! My baby! No! Wait, I plan on building a holding cell. A place so stark, so empty, so completely removed from the world that I can condition her to cooperate with me fully.
You can cry and scream like the rest of them, but it will make no difference. We're very cold-hearted, so to speak.
In the quiet corners of California, two men, Leonard Lake and Charles Ng, hid a darkness so terrifying that it took years for the truth to be uncovered. First, there's Leonard Thomas Lake, who's also known as Leonard Hill, and, by a variety of other aliases, was an American survivalist and serial killer. During the mid-1980s, Lake and his accomplice, Hong Kong-born Charles Ng, raped, tortured, and murdered an estimated 11 to 25 victims at a remote cabin near Wilseyville, California, 150 miles east of San Francisco. Upon being arrested on unrelated charges in 1985, Lake swallowed cyanide pills that he had sewn into his clothing and died 4 days later. Then comes Charles Chitat Ng, who is a convicted Hong Kong-born serial killer who committed numerous crimes in the United States.
And it's just like I told the judge, may God forgive me, I want him dead.
Charles Ng has shown nothing but contempt for life, for law, for anything and everything good. He has killed many people and for no reason other than for his amusement.
He is believed to have raped, tortured, and murdered between 11 and 25 victims with his accomplice Leonard Lake at Lake's cabin in Calaveras County, California, 60 miles, 96 kilometers from Sacramento, between 1983 and 1985. After his arrest and imprisonment in Canada on robbery and weapons charges, followed by a lengthy dispute between Canada and the U.S., Ng was extradited to California, tried, and convicted of 11 murders. He is currently on death row at California Medical Facility. As the story unfolds, what was once a petty crime becomes the key to unraveling a nightmare of unimaginable horror, revealing the twisted partnership between Lake and Ng and the dark legacy they left behind. Leonard was born as the eldest of 3 kids. Life seemed normal at first, but things changed drastically when his parents divorced. Leonard was only 6 at the time. His mother remarried and had 2 more daughters, and Leonard, along with his siblings, ended up living with their grandmother. Leonard wasn't your typical kid. Sure, he was smart, but something was off. He became obsessed with pornography at a young age. Shockingly, his grandmother encouraged some of his disturbing behavior, like taking nude photographs of his sisters. It was around this time that Leonard also began experimenting with chemicals, dissolving mice in acid.
Leonard not only wanted physical domination, but he wanted psychological domination. He wanted them to be totally open to him, so that they lost their individuality, lost their personhood, and totally became his victim.
As a teenager, he read The Collector, a novel about a man who kidnaps and imprisons women. Leonard didn't just read it, he became inspired by it. Back home, Leonard tried to settle into civilian life. He briefly attended college but dropped out, drawn instead to San Francisco's free-spirited hippie culture. He even got married in 1969, but his wife left him after discovering his obsession with making and starring in pornographic films. These weren't ordinary films. They involved bondage and sadomasochism. Leonard found himself at a commune, living a secluded life and eventually marrying a woman named Clara Lynn Ballas, or Cricket, as she was called. Together, they started preparing for what Leonard believed was an inevitable nuclear apocalypse. He began building a bunker to survive what he thought was the end of the world. Then, Leonard met Charles Ng, a young man with a troubled past of his own. Ng had escaped from a military prison after being caught stealing weapons, and when the two met in the early 1980s, they clicked in the worst possible way. Leonard, older and more experienced, became a mentor to Ang. Their bond quickly turned sinister.
I certainly enjoy sex. I certainly enjoy the dominance of climbing on a woman and using her body.
Men, women, and even children became their victims. They had a routine. Men and babies were killed almost immediately, but women were held captive in a dungeon Leonard built near his remote cabin. These women endured unspeakable horrors before meeting their end. Leonard and Ung filmed many of their victims, capturing their suffering on videotape. Leonard's friend, Charles Gunner, became another victim. Leonard invited Gunner on a road trip after his divorce, but only Leonard came back, driving Gunner's van. To others, Leonard claimed Gunner had run off with a woman. In reality, Gunner was gone for good, buried somewhere near Leonard's property. As the years went by, the disappearances piled up. Families vanished from their homes.
And took a look around the grounds, and at that point in time, there was a tool shed.
Leonard and Ing left a trail of destruction, their victims' belongings, identities, and even vehicles often used as trophies or tools for their next crimes.
What we're looking at is what has been described as the inner cell area of this bunker. As you can see, the door was hidden with a 3-fault shelf.
The turning point came on June 2nd, 1985, when Leonard was caught shoplifting in South San Francisco.
After looking at it, noticed that the wall went farther back into the hillside. And then as they dug around a little more, they found that there was quite a bit of the building that went back into the dirt. So that made them think, well, how do you get in? And they started looking, and they found a secret passageway.
The police found a gun in his possession linked to one of his victims. Knowing he couldn't talk his way out, Leonard did something shocking. He swallowed a cyanide pill he had hidden on him. He died before police could bring him to trial. Ang wasn't so lucky. He fled to Canada, but was eventually caught and extradited to the United States. His trial revealed the horrors he and Leonard had inflicted on their victims, shocking the nation. Leonard Lake and Charles Ong's crimes remain some of the most chilling in American history.
I believe that if I can construct a holding cell, I can create a facility that is so stark and so empty that fairly quickly, by a combination of painful punishments when I'm displeased, I can quickly condition a young woman to cooperate with me fully. It may not work. However, I want to try.
Their story is a haunting reminder of the evil that can lurk behind ordinary faces. The end of Leonard Lake and Charles Ong's reign of terror came crashing down on a quiet day in June 1985. It all started with a petty crime. Ang was caught shoplifting a simple vice. Leonard Lake, calm and calculating, tried to smooth things over by offering to pay for the stolen item. But the police noticed something strange. His ID didn't match his face, and the name on it, Robin Scott Stapley, belonged to a man who had been reported missing. Things escalated when they searched the brown Honda Lake that was driving. Inside, they found a gun with an illegal silencer. Lake, realizing the game was up, was taken to the station. There, he made his final move. While sitting alone in an interrogation room, he pulled off the ultimate escape. He swallowed a cyanide pill hidden in his clothes, collapsing moments later. 4 days later, he was gone, leaving behind only his horrifying legacy.
Why did this have to happen to these people? And two men causing such tragedy in the lives of so many people, and not just the family lives of the victims, but other people who were affected during the investigation.
But this wasn't the end of the story. The utility bill led investigators to Lake's remote Wilseyville cabin, a place that could only be described as a house of horrors. Police uncovered a hidden dungeon, human remains, and 2 videotapes that revealed the unimaginable torment Lake and Ang inflicted on their victims. The tapes, hauntingly labeled M Ladies, captured Ang and Lake tormenting their captives, showing the full extent of their cruelty. Charles Ong wasn't off the hook. Months later, he was caught shoplifting again. this time in Canada. During the scuffle, Ong shot a security guard but was ultimately overpowered and arrested. After years of legal battles to avoid extradition,
Legal system better and longer than any criminal in the history of the United States that was born here.
Ang was finally sent back to California. In 1999, justice caught up with him. Despite his attempts to shift the blame onto Lake, the evidence was undeniable. Ang was convicted of 11 murders and sentenced to death. Even now, decades later, Ang sits on death row, his fate in limbo due to California's moratorium on the death penalty. Leonard Lake may have escaped judgment, but his partner in crime remains behind bars, a reminder of one of the most chilling cases in modern history. If stories like this give you chills and keep you on the edge of your seat, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. There's so much more to uncover in the darkest corners of history. Let me know what you think of this case. Do you think justice was served?